There we go. With our powers combined. Fantastic. Great to see you all. Thank you so much again for doing this. This is lovely. And let me pull up as well the questions that I had, just briefly brainstormed. They're not gospel. We can see how the conversation goes, and we'll of course be pulling in plenty from the audience too. While I'm finding these questions, do any of you have questions before we get started here, or anything on your mind you wanted to clarify? Yeah, cool. Not your first rodeos, I know. Okay, let me find. Okay, here we go. I have found them. Excellent. So in just a sec, we will let everybody, I'm just copy and pasting this. We'll let everybody in. We'll do that round of introductions. So, and then we'll just dive in. And, for the first one, we'll keep it pretty high level, if that sounds okay. And we'll kind of talk broadly about, and, maybe in some ways, maybe John or Ginny, that might be kind of an interesting way to kind of just start the conversation. How, what tools are being used to spread this misinformation, this disinformation throughout these, social media networks. And then we can, talk a little bit about how effective you feel like the EU and then compared to the US has been in that regard. And then we can focus with our friends from Ukraine in particular on what's happening there. So, okay, great. Well, David, if you're willing, let's go ahead and let everybody in, and we'll be good to go.
We're rolling.
Okay, excellent. Well, sorry, David.
Go for it.
Okay, excellent. All right. So, hey, welcome everybody. Thank you for your patience as we're getting started just a little bit after the planned start time. And we are just so thankful to all of you for joining us on what I'm sure is going to be an extremely, thought-provoking and incredibly timely discussion about combating misinformation and disinformation in the war in Ukraine. As you saw, in the flyer, and as I'm sure you've been following in the news, this has been an important, if maybe underappreciated element of this ongoing war. And in some ways, it's also been, if you can call it a good news story, at least an element of the conflict that has at least been broadly seen to be somewhat effective in terms of the response to Russian misinformation and disinformation. And a lot of the folks, as symboled on the screen here, frankly, are at the front lines, including our friends from StopFake in Ukraine, as well as from Microsoft, and of course the Observatory on social media with a new realm of data and a new report on the topic that we're going to be getting into. So we have some, questions pre-planned here to help guide the conversation, but there's going to be plenty of chances for all of you to weigh in with your own thoughts, your own questions. So I encourage all of you to, start thinking of those if you haven't already. We'll use the Q&A function since this is a Zoom webinar here, and we'll turn to those just momentarily. But first, we wanted to do a proper, round of introductions here, so you get a better sense for everybody on the panel. I'll start by introducing Ginny, if that's okay, and then would love it if you guys wouldn't mind, John in particular, Oleksandr and Olena, to tell us a little bit about, your own backgrounds as well before we dive in with some of these questions. And same thing, Ginny, if you'd like to tell us a little bit more about the group that you lead at Microsoft, that'd be fantastic. But just to kick it off here, Ginny, Senior Director of the Democracy Forward program at Microsoft. And this is an important initiative within Microsoft's technology and corporate responsibility organization that's focused on addressing ongoing challenges to the stability of democracies globally. What an easy challenge. The program includes efforts to protect elections, political parties, campaigns, and NGOs from cyber-enabled threats. The Democracy Forward team also leads Microsoft's work to improve the information ecosystem, which includes combating disinformation, expanding news distribution, increasing media literacy, and working with community-based programs, and newsrooms to use technology to expand their reach. Before joining Microsoft in 2014, Ginny was vice president of political at CMDI, which she advised presidential and Senate campaigns on their efforts to leverage data and technology to improve their finance and treasury operations. And she was also voted the Washingtonians 2021 most influential people list. So congratulations. Ginny, that was a really quick introduction to, I know, all the important work that your team does. So maybe if you'd like to take just a quick minute to kind of unpack any of that you would like to, feel free, and then we'll kind of go down the line and introduce the others.
Sure, thank you. It's always fun to have your official bio read in front of you. Thank you. Yeah, the program, as you described, is we have a lot of different functions within the company. And even though I know the conversation here today is going to be really a focus on mis and disinformation, there is an element of cyber warfare that plays into what we're seeing, obviously, in Russia and Ukraine. And so our team works on those efforts as well, recognizing that a lot of these hybrid threats, as they're called, a lot of these efforts, particularly by nation states, are not one or the other. They tend to be combined in many ways. And so we explore the intersection of that. And that's a lot of the work that our team does. And then on the mis and disinformation end, we'll get into it here in the conversation, but it's worth noting that people don't tend to think of Microsoft when they think of those issues. And so part of what that enables us to do is look at creative ways that we as a company can have impact, can be a leader in the tech space, given that we're in a slightly different position, but also acknowledging our responsibility. We're still a platform where a lot of news is consumed, where a lot of people get information, whether by search queries or our Microsoft News platform. And so we do have a responsibility when it comes to ensuring that authoritative content is available in all regions. And so happy to have a conversation with a little more detail, but that's kind of it in a nutshell.
It's lovely. Thank you so very much, Jenny. We really appreciate that. And John, thank you for taking the liberty of posting your bio in the chat there so folks can refer to that. We'll, of course, include links as we go through here, guys, including to the observatory, which, as you note, has had some really interesting work come out recently on tracking the spread of misinformation with regard to the COVID-19 vaccines, and of course now with Ukraine in particular. Anything else you wanted to elaborate on, John, in terms of the role of the observatory on social media?
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, so I think I posted it, but I'll just go through it because I'm not sure it went to the participants. I'm the executive director here at the Indiana University Observatory on social media. Our main thing we do is we study scientific study using very physical science methods, mathematical methods to study information flow on networks, and with a particular angle on misinformation. And that's as part of the observatory has this mission to hold to look for misinformation online, to hold platforms to account, to study the way their algorithms are spreading misinformation in broader ways. And we're also involved in educating new journalists in the future with data science skills to use the tools that we provide, which is the third thing we do, is provide these tools for other people to study misinformation for themselves. We've recently been looking at misinformation around the invasion of Ukraine, and a lot of COVID misinformation has been spread as well. So thank you. I'm looking forward to talking more about this.
Thanks so much, John. And thank you for pointing that out. I see now that the chat only went to the panelists. So thank you for elaborating on your background and the incredibly important role of the observatory here. And then finally, we're extremely grateful to be joined by both Oleksandr and Olena from StopFake. And I'll post that link for everybody in just a moment as well. But this is just such an important organization, literally at the front lines now. Combating this misinformation and disinformation stories as they come out in real time. And it's not an easy task, and we're going to be digging into that. But I'm wondering if Oleksandr, Olena, if you guys wouldn't mind maybe introducing a little bit about, yourselves, kind of how you got to where you are now, and then we can, pivot and start talking about the role of StopFake in particular and what you've been involved with.
Okay, hello everyone. I can
Okay,
start,
please,
I
yeah.
guess. Yeah, I can start maybe. I've been working with at StopFake since 2018 and together with Olena. And before that, I've been involved in different media organizations, but for 4 years, almost for more than 4 years now, I do the banking of pro-Kremlin Russian disinformation, which is an extremely important task today and was since 2013, as you mentioned, and much more important now. However, it's much more tough psychologically to do now because of this really great number of disinformation narratives and all that kind of nonsense, I would say, so that it's almost sometimes it's impossible to debunk what they say because it has no logic at all. Also, I would like to mention about myself that since last year, from April to January this year, I was a Fulbright visiting researcher at IU Bloomington, so I know many of you, and I say hello to all of my friends in Bloomington and beyond. And I guess I will pass to Olena.
Thank you, Sasha. Hi, I'm Olena Churanova. I come to fact-checking from journalism. I'm working in journalism since 2010 and work for different media organization and for Ukrainian service of Voice of America as well. For 3 years, I was correspondent in Kiev. And since 2016, I'm working in StopFake because I'm considering this very important job. It's actually, it's not just a month of war in Ukraine, it's almost 8 years, not almost, but 8 years of war in Ukraine. And for all these 8 years, we also have this information war. Our work in StopFake is very important, and I'm really happy that I joined this organization and could help it with everything that I could do. Since 2016, I'm a fact checker, and since 2020 to 2020, I'm also editor and responsible for cooperation of our organization with Meta, ex-Facebook, and we also provide this work and debunk different fakes on social media as well.
Thank you so much, Olena. And I didn't know that, Oleksandr, as well. So I'm so glad that we get to at least virtually welcome you back to Bloomington. And again, I know I speak for everybody when I say, to you both, we're so incredibly sorry about everything that's happening in Ukraine. And we hope that your friends, that your family are safe. And we just are so thankful for you taking the time out to have this conversation. And hopefully we can find other ways to support each other, going forward from here. But just in brief, I wanted to begin, especially for the students in the group that might not be, quite as aware of how, frankly, misinformation and disinformation spreads. It seems so readily on so many different social media networks, including the roles of, troll farms, et cetera, that, some folks might be aware of, and how that's perhaps changed even since, 2016, when it first came, to be more of a front of mind topic for us. So I'm wondering if maybe we could start with maybe John on that one, and just kind of ask how you felt and kind of what about how these social media networks have been weaponized to an extent in this case, right, to spread this misinformation and disinformation. Then we can get into different ways that have been tried, at least in the EU and the US, to combat that.
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, we've been looking at quite a few different ways to study how people manipulate social media and the particular vulnerabilities of social media to manipulation. I think probably the one we're most famous for is the Botometer tool we produce, which studies automated inauthentic accounts. So people can create an account on Twitter, which would automatically post stuff at certain times of the day or respond to people in certain ways and do many other things. And these bots can be used to provide links to online misinformation. They can also be used to give a sense of a grassroots support for some kind of campaign, which is fake. So this fake grassroots support is called astroturfing. And they spread doctors' images, and they just generally create a sense that there's public support for an agenda where it's actually something that's an individual's agenda. So that we say is against Twitter's terms and conditions, and it's something we want to try and get a handle on. As well as that, there's a lot of coordination amongst these accounts. So when they all tend to post Twitter links at the same time, or there was these cases in the Trump's first general election where there were lots of accounts posting pro-Trump tweets, getting it on the trending lists. And this kind of coordination is a problem for Twitter. And the other thing that we are interested in is this idea of super spreaders of misinformation. And these are accounts often verified. I mentioned Donald Trump earlier, but there are other examples that tend to post misinformation. And because they're verified, they get a lot of retweets, they're very popular, but they also are very hard for Twitter to regulate as well, because they're quite famous people. And if you remember when they did finally take down Donald Trump's account, there was a lot of backlash against that. So these are the main ways that social media are being influenced.
Thank you so much. Setting, and I saw you kind of nodding at different points, Ginny, as well. And I'm wondering if you might care to, pick up on some of the points that John just made there, and maybe even reflect a little bit on how you've seen, tactics change, especially since 2016. Like, one thing I've read a little bit about is how, instead of just having bots and algorithms, sending out these various tweets, that one way around some different filters is occasionally having, humans involved and sending out some of those, and it's tougher to spot. It's in some circumstances there. So anyway, I was wondering if you could reflect a little bit on how you see, this kind of social media arms race playing out, and if you feel like the platforms, not only Twitter, but of course others, are getting ahead of the curve enough here, and maybe what more we could be doing. And we'll of course turn to deep fakes in a little bit.
Sure. Well, I'll start by acknowledging that the technology tools are just that. They're tools, they're weapons being used by adversaries, sometimes domestic, sometimes nation state focused. One of the things that we're really interested in that maybe we can talk a little bit more about during this conversation is, why does it work? Even if you get better and the tools are able to reduce the amount of disinformation, which is certainly the goal and something we'll talk about here as far as what the tech companies are doing, we also are really exploring, why are they so effective? Why are disinformation campaigns so effective? And a lot of it comes down to the psychology. So there are people who study psychology that have a lot to say about this. It's fascinating, I think, about repetition and the number of times you see a story and how you start to believe it because you see it so many times. But there's also length of time. So if you look at the number of Russian citizens who are believing everything that they're hearing, they have been primed for that over a very long period of time. I'm not excusing them from their own ability to decipher truth, but that is why they are believing what they're seeing, because the opposition information, meaning information that opposes what they're being told, has been removed from the ecosystem over time, and they've only been seeing a certain narrative. And that will do a real number on you psychologically. We saw the same thing here in the US when a lot of people don't understand why so many seemingly normal people believed that our election was stolen. In large part, it's because they had been primed to not trust the media. And there had been a lot of factors that fed into that, and the media was not completely out of that on their own. But there were a lot of reasons, and they'd been told not to trust the media for so long. And a lot of other narratives have been built over time. So there's a lot that goes into the disinformation campaigns that we've seen here. But I just wanted to acknowledge that a huge component of it is why people believe it. On the tool side, and as far as what has been done and what media companies are doing, first of all, for those of you who are unaware, the European Union came out with sanctions against Russian state media, and essentially said that a few of the most prominent state media sites should be entirely removed within Europe, which is of course their domain, from the social media platforms. But a lot of the companies had started to consider taking actions. In the case of Microsoft, we did take action before those sanctions came, because we were having similar reflections. We were looking at the RTs and the Sputniks out there and trying to decipher, how to interact with them on our sites, and should they even have a place on them. And within hours, I think, essentially of the invasion, we had conversations internally where we agreed there was no place for them on our platforms. We didn't need a government sanction to tell us that. We felt pretty comfortable that that was the right decision to make, and started to take those sites down. And a lot of the other companies did the same, and have gone even further with other activities. But the state media is a portion of this. But of course, as we know, they will find other ways. Disinformation always finds a way. And so while you can take down things like RT and Sputnik, that is only getting really the surface of it. And so there are big challenges ahead, I think, for tech companies, Microsoft included, on when and how to determine there is disinformation during a conflict or a war, and when to take down sites that maybe aren't easily identified as nation state driven media. So there's a lot that's going on. Another thing that the European Union has been doing over time is building out, I think you referenced the code of conduct. There's similar actions in Australia, Canada as well has done something similar, where in lieu of legislation, at least so far, the governments are asking the tech companies to come to the table with solutions and promises and commitments, where we're having conversations about how to solve these very challenging issues. If disinformation was an easy thing to solve, obviously it would have been solved by now. There are lots of different components to it, and nobody wants to be the arbiter of truth. And in some cases, there are legal consequences of doing that. So it's a big challenge, but I do think the code of practice in Europe has been a good step. It does look like it'll lead to legislation, where then the companies will be compelled to take action, whereas right now, most of what's being done has been voluntary and in line with the code. Anyways, I can keep talking about any of those areas, but those were just areas that I thought might be interesting to talk about here.
Well, they certainly are, Ginny. That's very, very well said. Like you mentioned, there's so many interlocking narratives on so many levels here, right, that we could get into. I mean, everything from basically isolating Russia further through, a more of a digital blockade, which, as you referenced, there's a lot of pressure on tech companies to do that, even going so far as to, the pressure ICANN itself, through DNS. And if that's something that's, a precedent that ICANN might set. So far, they haven't, right? But we will get more into the code for disinformation. I didn't know Australia was doing that too. That's interesting. Obviously, we have a very different, First Amendment tradition here with lies being covered in the US, another way that we're an outlier, but that'll be really interesting to follow. And let's get more into that, as well as, like you said, why the heck does this work so well? I think that'd be fascinating to unpack further too. But first, let's turn to our friends from StopFake, if that's okay. And would love to hear, frankly, a bit more about your efforts, so far in this ongoing war, guys. My goodness, as I mentioned at the outset, a dominant narrative so far with regards to the war has been that Russian attempts to replicate their disinformation, misinformation playbook that we've seen for many years at this point have been pretty unsuccessful. That's in no small part due to, frankly, your tremendous efforts. So I'm wondering if you could reflect a little bit on why you think, Ukraine generally, and, StopFake at the front lines here has been successful, at least relatively so far, right? In debunking these stories before they really can go viral. Maybe you could just tell us a little bit about some of the techniques, some of the methodology you use. As you mentioned, there's so many, attempts all the time. What's your system of triage look like? You know what I mean? Like which areas do you want to focus on to make sure they have priority? Would love to hear any thoughts. And I'm not sure who'd like to start, Olena or Oleksandr, either way. Maybe Olena, if you'd like to, feel free. Would love to hear
okay.
it.
I
Lady
don't care.
first, right? Yeah.
StopFake is successful, but if we are talking about our experience, how we actually debunk all this bullshit that Russia spread for all these 8 years, we didn't use some specific methods, some I don't know, some secret weapon here, just pure journalism. Actually, I think that fact checking is actually it's journalism. So we just check all these fakes that they are spread about Ukraine. And the only difference of StopFake is just that we are working only with Russian disinformation because you know that there are a lot of fact checking organizations right now, and fact checking now is very popular activity among journalists, among media, but we are working just with Russian disinformation for all these 8 years. As talking about why Russian propaganda right now is not so successful, I could say that because for all these 8 years, they built this system, they spread these narratives, and they mix these narratives with some reality, maybe with some truth, because in this way, misinformation is more efficient. And when we're talking about reasons of this full invasion from 24th of February, all these reasons were based on such outrageous lie, was based on just a pure lie without any reality at all. So from the start of this invasion, we all understand that they will lose because it all based on just a pure lie. And now we see how they continue spread this lie, and but they tackling more and more difficulties because people are seeing that they couldn't take Kiev for 48 hours, how they say on their TV programs, TV shows, and that they are not the second successful army in the world, etc. Maybe Sasha say more because I'm really nervous and didn't get a lot of practice with my English and couldn't.
Oh no, you're doing great.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
no,
thank you.
No, that was lovely. No, thank you. That was fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, Oleksandr.
Yeah, if you want me to continue, yeah, definitely. I guess we can tell a lot about how StopFake works, how we do debunking, what types of disinformation and misinformation we encounter every day. For the last 8 years, we could write a book, actually, a few books, I guess, yeah, even discussing the first months of this second or third phase of invasion, because definitely the invasion started, as Olena mentioned during her introduction, more than 8 years ago, on February 20th, 2014. So I want everyone to remember about this. Here I want to say that, just to add to the previous speakers, that it's important to remember that honestly, I am a pessimist when we talk about disinformation. I was an optimist, but I turned a pessimist over the years, because I don't believe that disinformation can be can be like we cannot win altogether. So it will be definitely here or there, even if there is some regime change in Russia. We have these issues with China, with some other countries, etc. Because disinformation is human nature. It's about lies. It's about lying, about telling something wrong, about doing something in someone's favor. And it's interesting to see how Russian society changes over the years, how they've been in this disinformation bubble, I guess, since early 2000s, since probably 2004, 2005, when Russian media started to lie about Orange Revolution in Ukraine, about democratic aspirations of Ukraine. Then they started lying about Holodomor in Ukraine, about Ukrainian church, etc. And that just kept growing. And from 2014, they just made this a number of narratives that they developed and tried to fit to their people, to the population, to people of Russia, telling that Ukrainian is bad, telling that Ukrainian does not exist as a state, that Ukrainians, at least some Ukrainians, Nazis, fascists, here in Ukraine we are a colony of the United States or the European Union or the West in general, which they believe and see as a main enemy of Russia. And this keeps going since the Soviet Union. Here we see that there are some similarities from the Soviet Union. And when we see this, it's even interesting. Yeah, we have the social media now, but the methods, some of the tools remain the same. So they, at least like 100 years ago, 80 years ago, before the World War II, they had just press and radio mostly, but now they have more these types of platforms where they can feed this disinformation, spread this disinformation. Social media is now one of them, and one of the most effective. If, I don't know, the Germany had this, had social media, they would do the same, I guess, today. And it was interesting for me recently to see the similarities between the winter war that the Soviet Union started against Finland in, I guess it was 1939, 1940, I guess it was. So, and the war in Ukraine, the current war in Ukraine, they use the same narratives, the same words. They just copy paste from the press before the winter war and now. So it's the same, but now they have more platforms they used to have 80 years ago. So it's all about psychology. It's all about lying. It's all about people believing. In Ukraine, I guess since 2014, we did a great job in limiting the scope of Russian disinformation by limiting access to pro-Russian media in Ukraine. Most of them. Unfortunately, we have some of them. This is a big mistake. I would like all of them to be eliminated. We cannot, of course, eliminate those media that still function on the occupied territories of Donbass and Crimea, but we could do much more to prevent our information space from being disturbed by this disinformation from the Russian side. We could do this. There were some positive efforts made in this direction, but not enough, in my opinion. But still, in Ukraine, we have discussions. We have this, I don't know, the freedom, the freedom of speech that we cherish, that we do. We have journalism, professional journalism. There is almost no professional journalist in Russia. It was eliminated, destroyed in the 90s and early 2000s when Putin came to power. And also, I would like to mention here that even some Russian journalists that claim to be good, they are not so good because they are also influenced by maybe they are liberals, but when it comes to Ukraine, they think as those, I would say, very similar to what Russian media states. And for instance, Ovsyannikova, the former employee of the First Channel, She is just a tool, one of the tools, a very clever tool to spread on the social media, and she is used in a new disinformation campaign against Ukraine and in favor of current Russian regime and against sanctions that they imposed by the West. So it's like they still work, improve, and work, and will be working on this. So I guess we'll stop here.
Oh no, really.
For now. Thank you.
Oh no, thank you, Oleksandr, and you as well, Olena. That's just
Yeah,
brilliant.
I just
Please,
remind
please.
one thing that I forgot to say, as we are talking about weaponization of social media in nowadays, and weaponization of social media during this war as well. And we actually see like real examples how Russia used social media actually to kill people, for example, to spread different posts about illegal evacuation of people from Mariupol, for example, and they actively using social media for that, for example. But the thing that I want to say that they start to weaponize fact-checking as well. From the start of this war, they launched different channels in Telegram, and maybe they also launch websites, as I'm not wrong. And on these websites and these channels in Telegram, they spread so-called fact checks, and they debunk different kind of information that actually is true. And they say that they, so it's like, really George Orwell right here, like when they call in war, peace, and so on. For example, several days ago, they say that it's not true that Mariupol is destroyed, that actually it's absolutely not destroyed at all, and you just need to put windows back on the houses, and people could live there like in several months, and everything gonna be all right, like life is coming back to Mariupol. So it's a really outrageous lie, and they also work with fact-checking and against fact-checkers in this way as well.
It's such an important point, Olena, because as you were saying, I mean, it seems like the work that you guys are involved with of just being, investigative journalists, all right, basically just putting together the facts, using those as tools to debunk these stories. It's so incredibly important, but it's also very time intensive and hard to do. And like you mentioned, I mean, it's there's just so much coming out. I imagine it must be hard for you guys and all of the staff and volunteers you work with, just to organize, like, hey, which of these stories do we want to take on, right? So I'm wondering, before we bring John and Ginny back into the conversation, can you just briefly tell us a little bit about what that triage process looks like how you guys decide which stories to focus on? And maybe you could even take a recent one as an example to kind of help us see what your typical day looks like.
Actually, a typical day looks like we're talking about different topics and discuss these topics in different messenger channels. And just discuss all together if this topic is worth debunk, to debunk, actually. Because of course you could just open typical Russian news website, and you could see a lot of fakes. Like, for example, from the beginning of the war, they just you could open this news feed and it fake, a lot of fakes. But we try to choose stories that are important, that are spread quickly, that are harmful. For example, like stories about different illegal evacuations, or stories about Mariupol, and when Russia say that it's not them shelling Mariupol theater or hospital in Mariupol. So of course we choose topics that are important and important to debunk for our audience and other audience as well, because we spread our fact checks in different languages. Maybe Sasha could add.
Excellent. Yeah, Sasha, anything that you'd like to?
Oh, I
add on?
guess Olena was right when she was telling how we work and how we decide what we choose. And my my way of choosing is similar. I always choose what I believe is the most important and what I personally know I can debunk, because not everything you can debunk, honestly. But when you see something which is nonsense, which is a bullshit, I also you have to debunk this. You have just at least to try to mention to the people what's right, what's wrong here, and what actually happened. And I also, when we talk about current situation, when Russia always says that that Russia does not, Russian army does not shell and bombard the cities, and that Ukrainian army does this, and that Ukrainian army violates the Geneva Conventions, it's clearly obvious that it's wrong. And I understand the way how to make a counter argument, because it's obvious everyone's telling about this, and the West is telling about this, and there is a Geneva Convention, and for instance, we don't have this some kinds of weapons that they have. So it's obvious that not we do this bombarding, by they do. But unfortunately, the Russians in majority won't hear and won't see this. So they will still be living in this information bubble created by themselves. But still, this work is very important.
Oh, absolutely.
For us, for the rest of the world, and for the future.
No, the stakes are high. That's such a good point. And
I want to add that we also have access to different tools like CrowdTangle and so on, and also, of course, we taken it into account how the spread of this disinformation. Of course, if it's just several posts and several, just like one website just wrote about it, of course, we didn't take that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you both so much. Well, we're going to turn to audience questions in just a minute. So I'm following those as they start to come in, which is fantastic. But I'd like to turn to John, bring you back into the conversation next, and hear just a little bit more, if that's okay, about the recent report that you referenced from the Observatory on social media on the misinformation, disinformation war in Ukraine. What have you guys been finding in terms of how this, for example, has compared against other misinformation campaigns that you've studied, including with regard to the COVID-19 vaccines? Similar tactics, techniques, or are we seeing something different here?
Yeah, thank you, Scott. Should I share my screen? I've got a few pretty pictures to show people.
Of course, please.
I'll just see if that works. I just have to pick. This is the one. Okay, does that show okay?
That looks great. Thanks. Yeah.
All right. Thanks. Yeah. So I think we are seeing a general pattern here that the Russian misinformation campaign is not as effective as we thought it was going to be. And I can talk a little bit more about that as we look at the information I'm going to present. We are mainly here only focusing on Twitter, so there is a big proviso here, because I think there are a lot of other platforms, and Twitter is mainly focused in the West, and I think Russia may be focusing a lot of its misinformation campaigns outside of the West. So, and there are evidence to back that up. So there are quite big provisos to what we are presenting here. I think we're sort of looking at Twitter accounts, Twitter messages on Twitter that are linked to Ukraine over the past 6 weeks. I think we started gathering data, and you can see that there is a large number of tweets increased around the time of the Russian invasion, which is marked on the dotted line. And one interesting thing we found is that there are a lot of new accounts created on that particular day. The normal sort of trend was around 10,000 and it sort of quadrupled. And other people have looked at those accounts and found that there was suspicious activity where they were liking a lot of Russian state-sponsored accounts. And there's a lot of Stand With Putin being spread around on that particular day as well. So there was some suspicious activity with likes of Russian state-sponsored accounts. This is this idea that we have lots of accounts sharing misinformation, sharing links to misinformation at the same sort of times. And we can build these networks of these accounts. If accounts share the same links a lot, then that's very suspicious. But looking at these, we're not finding many linked to Russian campaigns. It's mainly the sort of things you find are like people pushing malware and advertisements and trying to sign people up to cryptocurrency, Ukraine themes, with Ukraine themes. Another thing we were looking at was these accounts that tweet very similar messages. So this network I'm presenting shows a lot of accounts which have a link between two accounts. You can see a link here. It means that they post very similar messages a lot in common with each other. So we can look at the messages, and cluster 7, for example, are accounts that are doing this cryptocurrency scam where they're trying to get people to send money to their cryptocurrency accounts. And they've mainly been deleted. The red color shows they've been deleted by Twitter. But we only found one small group of accounts, which is number 9, which was posting Russian linked themes. There were a lot of kind of far right politicians here and people spreading their messages about Ukraine, like 4 and 5, which are linked to Turkey and France. But this is quite a big deal, these coordinated tweets, these very similar tweets with very similar language. And we're looking like, we're measuring like about 7% of the language on Twitter about Ukraine was all very similar to other copies of it, of themselves. There was a lot of copy pasting going on. We were calling it pasta posting. And this is another network around March the 7th. And you can see there are a lot more kind of recently created accounts in these networks, with the yellow ones, a lot of deleted accounts posting a lot of tweets. But again, these are not really linking strongly to Russian misinformation. In fact, this main one, 3, was a lot of accounts calling for a no-fly zone over Ukraine, which we consider may also be organic, and it may be that Twitter are suspending these accounts erroneously. So I think that's most of what we've been talking about. There's a kind of a new, more recent version of that, which I just off the press, I just wanted to show off. But again, this large group of accounts in the middle here are mainly Ukraine, pro-Ukraine accounts. There was some suspicion here of Russian accounts which were promoting the idea that Russia were prepared to use chemical weapons, which may be something that Russia wanted to do for its to scare people in Ukraine or something. I don't know, but that's another question. Anyway, that's all I have to present.
Just fascinating, John. Thank you so much for going through that with us, and I'm sure that's going to engender some follow-up questions from the audience. And and others. So excellent. Thank you. Really, really important and timely work. And then before turning to the audience questions here, just briefly, Ginny, please do reflect on what you just saw from John as well, of course. But I'm also wondering if you could bring in, this component of deepfakes, which we haven't talked about yet, but would like to hear, more about, of course, from StopFake as well. But I know this has been something that your group has been tracking. It's been on the radar in terms of this coming threat. I know at least a lot of us started to follow it in 2016. There was a lot of concern in the 2020 elections here in the States that would become more prevalent. So far, maybe it hasn't become as big of a deal, as concerning as a lot of us feared, but that's in part perhaps because, well, maybe you can tell us why you think that might be the case, right? And if it's a matter of motive, if it's a matter of technology that's kind of holding it back, or frankly, just a change in kind of strategy and tactics here, right? Instead of trying to, debunk perhaps all of these, deep fakes before they can go viral, it's a matter of, verification. So I'm wondering, maybe you could reflect a little bit on that aspect of what you've been seeing. And of course, also, please do chime in on anything you just heard from John and the other panelists.
Well, yeah, I'll address the deepfake question quickly, but essentially it's getting at what a lot of disinformation is about, which is when can you believe what you're seeing, what you're reading? Like, how do you, people have gotten to the point where they're not sure that they can trust what they read. Again, going back to the trust issues with the media and journalism and many other things that have been sort of deteriorated over time. But up until now, they still can sort of believe what they see. They believe pictures, even though pictures have been proven to be manipulated. They believe videos. And we've seen the emergence of what we call cheap fakes, which is essentially the easy manipulation of a video to change the context of when the video happens. So you edit it just right, so you miss what happens before and after. You only see a nugget, and that changes your perception of what happened without that context. We've also seen cheap fakes where a small edit, like slowing down a video, can make it look like someone is drunk, for example, or that they're assaulting somebody when in fact it's just a slowed down version that makes it look a lot worse than it is. And these have been tactics that we have actually seen have emerged, have been something we've all been sort of dealing with. But generally, you can release the full context, you can release the full audio visual of a video and get to the root of it at some point and essentially debunk what you had seen. But the big concern has been what happens when videos are manipulated using synthetic media AI, so that you can't, using your eyes or other things, determine what was real. What if someone is made to say or do something, a politician, that they didn't say or do? And frankly, we have been concerned about this as the next wave of disinformation, as a new tactic that, as the technology gets better and is democratized in a way where you don't have to be an expert on AI or synthetic media to create one of these deepfake videos. What does that look like for democracy, and how does that play out in the political environment? And until about a week ago, I think I would have said, well, it's still emerging. We haven't seen it. Not sure if it's actually going to happen. And many of you may be familiar with a really poorly done synthetic video of Zelensky appearing to say, lay down your arms to his Ukrainian countrymen. And that was not real. It was fake. It was poorly done. So most people actually could, just using their own eyes, determine that it wasn't real. But it was notable because it was the first time that we have seen in this environment an attempt at trying to manipulate people based on a synthetic video. And then to your point about solutions, we spent a couple of years working with a lot of partners in this space, including other tech companies, trying to figure out how you can use technology to determine that a video has been manipulated. And we had success, but then the technology to create the video got better, and then we got better, and then they got better, and we essentially realized this will never end. We will continue building better detection technology, and they will continue building better synthetic media technology, and this is not a long-term solution. That work still goes. It doesn't mean we stop doing it. A lot of people are still invested in that, but we shifted gears, to your point, and started focusing on the provenance or the authenticity of an image, video, or audio file. Essentially, at the point that a video is made, at the point that a picture is taken, the technology that is creating that can, I'm going to use terminology that's not accurate, but it will hopefully resonate, to essentially watermark it, stamp it in a way that if it is manipulated later on, it breaks this sort of like seal that indicates its authenticity. And so that when you then consume a video later, you have an indicator in whatever player you're using that this video has been altered. And you can sort of see at what point it was altered, and depending on the way the manifest is built, who altered it, and what it used to look like. And we think that is the true future for media consumption altogether. You will know if something is authentic. And by doing so, you then also know if it was manipulated. So that's the research that we're working on now, and actually have technical standards out that companies are starting to put into their systems.
Fascinating. Thank you so very much, Ginny. I really appreciate that. And I would like our friends from StopFake to be able to comment for sure on what you just heard from Ginny in terms of where she sees this, this arms race to a certain extent going. But also, frankly, we'd love to hear both from you, Olena, and Sasha as well about frankly, what more you feel like tech companies could be doing to help. I mean, including Microsoft, but also, frankly, us in academia. To help you, frankly, in your incredibly important roles here at the front line. So, I'm not sure if either of you would like to start. I'm quite agnostic, but any reactions? What more could we be doing to help you guys in your efforts? So, Sasha, would you, or Olena? Yeah, please go ahead. That'd be great.
I could say that for a moment, the only help we need, it's more weapon sanctions and arms. It's really the main priority right now. Because, for example, I'm in Ukraine right now. My relatives in occupation right now under Russia, and my husband in army, and we are actually in war right now. As we are speaking about information war and what public and private sector could do, I could say that, for example, our partnership with Meta is really efficient in that way, how we collaborate with them, because the one fact that when we rate all this fake news on social media, on Facebook and Instagram, and we rate Russian media, state media as well. They were very furious from the beginning of invasion, and they started writing a lot of angry letters to us, and they start to push on Meta as well. And then they just close ban Facebook, Instagram. I don't know about YouTube, but a lot of social networks, they just close access for their citizens, and so they cannot have this access to the truth right now. And it's really it's actually, from my point of view, it's just proving that this collaboration is efficient. When we could, through with the help of Meta, blur and put a mark on the information that it is false, it is misleading, or whatever. And also with the help of Meta, we also could share our fact checks, spread our fact checks through broader audience, not just through the audience that come to our website, but also through the users of Meta as well.
I would like to add here that in terms of information war, it's really important, in my opinion, to do at least three things. So the first one is media literacy. So we have to explain to the people what is a deepfake, how it functions, how it works, and how to distinguish a deepfake and an authentic video. Second, I guess here come the tech companies that can at least somehow to develop some mechanisms, some tools to prevent deepfake videos from spreading, maybe pre-checked. I don't know what's possible, but at least to limit the opportunities for those people who create deepfake videos to spread them, especially if that's if that concerns politically related deepfake videos, not satire, because sometimes you see just satire, which is just used as explanation of how deepfake videos work. And the third most important thing are the journalists who should fact check those videos, who also explain how deepfake videos work, who should show what's wrong with that video, etc. So it's just the regular fact checking jobs that we do, but with videos in this regard.
Yeah, and I could also add, as we're talking about deepfakes, actually, in this war, we didn't see a lot of deepfakes, and Russia didn't use them as other types of fakes. But it was just one deepfake with L.L.C that, and it was really bad quality of that deepfake, and we all just laugh from that video. But what actually helped in this situation when this deepfake started to spread around different channels in Viber, in Telegram, first of all, Ukrainians were Саша, як предупредить? Скажи. They were informed that such types of fakes could be spreading around them, so they knew that something like that will be coming from Russia. And of course, also we have different trainings about fact checking, and also my colleagues and I as well, we providing such types of trainings, so people knew how to distinguish such types of fakes. And also the third, it's a quick communication from our government, and it's really effective and quick right now. It's really quick comparing time before war. We even now have like anecdote, like when this war is over, this level and speed of communication will stay with us because it's really good, and because of this very quick communication, we just very quick debunk this bullshit that they start spreading about Zelensky, and nobody take it as something serious.
Fantastic. Thank you both so much. That's great to hear. So what we'd like to do now is start to turn to questions, comments from the audience, and we'll start with a fun comment from Sophia Asher, Oleksandr, who says, we miss you basically here at IUB, and we hope that you'll come back soon after Ukraine's victory. Hear, hear. Absolutely. And then looking at some of the questions in particular, Richard had mentioned that first, thanks, of course, you guys for this wonderful discussion. He mentions that one curiosity I'd like to hear the panelists' thoughts on is about the integration of information practices with conventional warfare tactics. For instance, it seems that a lot of challenging Russian disinformation comes from soldiers and civilians on the ground in the fight, sharing images and videos to social media like TikTok, which we haven't talked much about yet. It seems like Ukraine's forces are well prepared to be frontline fighters against those types of techniques, not just the Russian military, but also against disinformation. So maybe we can reflect a little bit more directly on, the role of, soldiers in this case, including Ukrainian soldiers, basically at the front lines, not only fighting for their country, fighting for their lives, but also for the, integrity of the information, right, that's coming out of that. including on TikTok, right? My goodness. So there's a lot of ways that we can take that reflection. I mean, maybe we'll just go in reverse order this time. So, Olena, Oleksandr, would you care to reflect on maybe some quick reactions from Richard's kind of question there? And then please, Ginny or John, if you have anything to add, that'd be great.
I can start here. I guess it's very important because they are the people who encounter the other side, who actually do the job on the front line, and they are the people who can, the soldiers, I mean, they're the people who can share, who can show what's really happening there. I personally do not follow TikTok, so I don't really know very well what's going on there. What I heard that there is a lot that the TikTok is full of videos made by Ukrainian soldiers about the events on the front line, which is nice, which is very good, which is very positive, because here we can, I guess we can outperform probably on the TikTok level, at least the number of videos, the number of posts we do about the war in Ukraine. And this is a very important tool we know today about among the younger population. So they can hear, they can see and hear, and listen about what's going on there, and maybe this somehow can make an impact on what younger generation in Russia thinks, because because TikTok is also very popular in Russia. So it's very important to spread this information beyond Ukraine, especially on the other side, in Russia. So I guess, and even it's even more important in a situation when we live in under martial law, when journalists sometimes do not have access to the front line because it's very dangerous. There are mines, and you know very well that many journalists have already been killed on the front line. So not many journalists will be risking their lives and going to those places where fightings are taking place. So the only people, not the only people, but there are some journalists who risk their lives and go there, but it's sometimes very good when we have some, at least some understanding on what's going on there from the first-hand experience of what's going on there. And this is just the first step, and then we see the official reactions, the official response of our general staff, of the presidential administration, etc. So it just works in conjunction. It provides us with necessary information about the war, about the events around the world, here in Ukraine, and maybe even some foreign perspective on this as well.
Thanks very much, Oleksandr. Brilliant. Yeah, Olena, anything to add?
Yeah, I could add that, of course, spreading more information is helpful, but if you're talking about about war events, it could be really dangerous, especially when it comes from soldiers, because we know that our enemy analyzing these types of social networks very carefully, and they analyze all video that are posted there. And of course, we also analyze that, because before this full invasion started, actually a lot of organization creates this map of Russian armies that are gathered around our borders, and this information actually were collected because of videos in TikTok as well. So during the war, it's very important. Of course, it's important to spread some information, but it's very important to for soldiers to know what to film, how to not to show different positions that the enemy could just get to know where your position are situated. And for example, we have the situation in Kiev when some of the residents of Kiev just post a video from one of the regions in Kiev when a tank were hiding in between regular houses, and the next day Russians just bombed just put a bomb there on this and destroyed all this area. And of course, our special services, they arrested this man and provide some talks with him that you shouldn't post stuff like that. So it's a difficult question, difficult topic to discuss, what to post during the war and how not to harm somebody with your video.
And yeah, I just would like to add that after this happened, to this what Olena told you about this TikTok video, Ukrainian parliament decided to have a criminal liability against everyone who discloses information about the positions of Ukrainian military. So now you can get, I don't remember exactly, I guess from 5 to 10 years in prison, something like that. I am not sure about, more than 5 years. So you have to be really careful with this. But the soldiers usually, from what I see and what I hear, they usually understand what they do because they have some strict rules. But the people, not everyone understands what you can post or what you cannot do in these times.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Yeah. Yeah, Ginny or John, anything else to add on that particular thread? We have several more coming in, so we'll do a bit of a lightning round to finish us out. But anything else on this topic first,
Well,
including TikTok?
I was just going to quickly build on the point about the leadership and just point out the juxtaposition or the differences between Ukrainian leadership and Russian leadership when it comes to use of technology and connecting with people, and the images of Putin at a very long table, completely removed from his team, never holding a cell phone, in a suit and tie with a old rotary phone, I think, next to him at one point, is very, very different, obviously, than the way that Zelensky is using social media to connect with people and to tell a story and to present himself. And the point was already made that is sort of at the top, and that there's like the groundswell that's happening with the citizens and the soldiers. But that difference, I think, tells more than just old versus young. It might also give some indications or clues as to why Russia's not been doing as well on the information warfare side as everyone thinks that they are the best at this, and it's starting to become clear that they might be a little out of touch and maybe missing out on how people communicate and what comes across well, and that probably comes from the top.
Really good observation. Yeah, add that, John, please.
Yeah, and I just quickly add to these ideas. There's this idea of strategic communication, which is the idea that warfare takes place not only in the battlefield, but also in the hearts and minds of everybody around the world. And there are a lot of factors involved, a lot of national interests involved in this. And so any sort of social media posts that are happening on the battlefield are actually sort of affecting the way people's opinions change around the conflict. So there's this there's a big strategic communication element to this. That's what I say.
Oh, there certainly is. No, thank you so much, John. And like I said, we'll finish off with a bit of a lightning round to get to everybody's questions, and keep them coming for sure. We'll get to as many as possible. And this kind of relates a little bit, Oleksandr, and it was regarding Shuo's question in the Q&A here, and that was about as you guys do this really important fact-checking work, I'm sure it is challenging sometimes because perhaps some of the information is classified based on issues of military secrecy. It sounds like in Ukraine, though, like you were saying, the response times and the communication has been pretty robust, pretty fast, frankly, especially during the war. So have you found that not to be, that much of a barrier, at least over the last month as this has played out?
In my opinion, it's sometimes yes, but still it depends what you want to debunk, honestly. if it's something about if it's something that you need to debunk about some military things, then yeah, it's not as fast because everything has to be checked by the military. But the government, in terms when it comes to the government, some political decisions, it's much faster than it used to be. So it's nice that when you have this, but like in my experience, in my understanding, there is here just two types of narratives that they used to have previously, and you can just debunk them in a minute or two, like in a figure of speech. But there are some types of fakes that they provide about the current situations, and you have to decide each time if you have how much time you would need to do this. So sometimes it's faster, sometimes it's not. It depends on what type of information you need. So the government, the President Zelensky's office provided as much faster now than they used to. So it helps.
No, that's fair. That's fair. I'm sure it does depend a lot on the circumstances. And we have several wonderful, I thought, questions from Oleksandr. So we'll turn to as many of these as we can as well, and they're parsed out just kind of by speaker, by group. So perhaps John, we can start with you, then we'll go to Ginny, and then Olena, and Oleksandr after that. And John, it looks like Oleksandr was asking, could you say a little bit more on the connections between accounts that copy and paste, misinformation and disinformation, and kind of what they're typically tweeting about? And she had also asked, have you noticed any of those accounts, switching, for example, from spewing out misinformation or disinformation about vaccines directly and pivoting over to, Ukraine, frankly?
Yeah, that's a great question. I can say that the idea that an account could be included in our analysis was because it had posted at least 5 tweets that match closely another 5 tweets from another account. So those 2 accounts were linked together because they had posted 5 tweets in common, which is kind of suspicious. We thought was our lower level of suspiciousness of like you had posted enough of these pasted pieces of text. The study we've done is at scale. We've got, it must be around 3 million tweets by now that are very suspicious. So we're not able to do content analysis yet. What we are planning to do, however, and watch this space, as we're writing this up, we'll be releasing all the content that we found in a shared form. So hopefully people will be able to look at the clusters themselves and do content analysis of those. So watch this space. There was a third thing which I've now forgotten, but I'm sure we can move on.
That's okay, John. I think that's plenty for us to chew on. No problem. And then Ginny, Oleksandr was also asking whether you wouldn't mind elaborating a bit on the innovations like indicating authenticity, so that watermarking point. And do you see any future educational potential for ordinary citizens being able to use such tools to be able to gain additional insights, perhaps before sharing some of this and some of these tweets and misinformation themselves?
Sure, I'll go through quickly some resources. One is there's a coalition that we founded along with Adobe, and we now have partners including Sony, TruePic, Twitter. It's called the Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity, and I'll put the link in the chat here in a second. And we call it C2PA. And this is where these technical standards have been written. But if you go to that website, you'll see a lot of resources explaining what authenticity means, how this coalition is going about it, what we think the future looks like when applying it. Adobe has started to build some of these tools into their systems, which makes sense given the world they live in with their main product. I'm forgetting the name, but it's the one that you manipulate images. I cannot think of it, but because of the work they do in that area, obviously that's important to them. We're also building it into our video creation. So that's where you as a user will be able to work with these tools, though you're welcome to go look at the technical standards. So it just sort of depends on your technical abilities and interests. But we also have media partners, I should note, including BBC, because we recognize that the media is where a lot of this is going to have to push as far as pushing people to adopt these standards. So I'll put that link in there, and that's one thing. Other resources, I put it in an answer to a message on here earlier, but I'm not sure. I think everyone may have seen it, but I don't know. I use Teams more than Zoom, apologies. So I don't know exactly what everybody saw. But we also have a partner that does great work called NewsGuard. So if you're interested in understanding, whether a site is an authoritative site, whether they tend to publish good content, whether they're reputable, NewsGuard is an organization that ranks and rates different publishers as far as identifying if they follow journalistic principles. And they make those ratings available through a browser plugin that you can install, so that as you're browsing the web, before you click on an article, you can see pretty quickly if they're a red rated or a green rated site. That helps you make a decision on what kind of information you want to consume. So that's another resource. And then we contributed to an online quiz called Spot the Deepfake, which helps walk you through the process of understanding how deepfakes are created and kind of testing your ability to identify real versus fake. It's hard. I think even though I helped contribute to it, I think I failed it the first time I took it. It's a challenging quiz, but it's a good resource for those who are interested. So I'll take those links and put them in the chat here in a moment.
Thanks so much, Ginny. That'd be fantastic. Those all sound extremely, extremely useful. And Oleksandr and Olena, one of the other questions that's come up is whether or not there's fact checking, and of course, please, John, Ginny, weigh in on this as well. But are there fact checking training or workshops available online, or other resources that students or others perhaps on the line now, or might be watching this after the fact, could utilize, right? So they could be trained up. Maybe they could even volunteer and work with you guys in this important work. So I'm not sure if you in particular host those training sessions, or if you're aware of any. Please, let us know.
I don't remember them at this moment, but I can share this information with Sophia privately. So I will try to remind myself about something. Maybe I don't know if it's something that happens now or something that was recorded before. They will try to find something. Discuss this question.
And maybe just to clarify.
Maybe Olena knows something.
Yeah, sorry, I'm turning off my video because I'm having some problem with the internet. But we have on our website, StopFake.org, on English version, we have such part on the website like tools. And there are a lot of articles in English about how to use different tools for in fact checking. So maybe this could be useful. Unfortunately, we have some courses, and our colleagues of mine are also took part in different educational courses, but they are on Ukrainian or Russian language, not English. And also, I'm trying to remind to think what tools in English we also have.
Oh, no problem. That's really helpful too. And do you guys work directly with volunteers who are interested in helping as well, or is it mostly just staff at StopFake?
Mostly it's staff, but for example, if you're talking about translation, or maybe if someone wants just to try to fact check something and to work with us like staffers, I think it's okay. And of course, we are open to different fakes to debunk. If you saw some fakes that are spreading about Ukraine, especially, you could also write to us, and we could check this information.
Brilliant.
There is a report fake kind of window at the bottom of the screen.
Fantastic. My gosh, guys, this has been, time has really flown. I think there's a lot more ground that we could cover. And we didn't even get a chance, frankly, to talk about some larger issues of internet access. As you mentioned, Olena, it can be challenging, I'm sure, right now. And, if we had more time, we could get into that, Starlink, a lot of other associated issues. But for now, maybe we can just do a final, quick round of final thoughts and reflections from each of the participants and panelists. And we'll, of course, after that, thank you all. So I'm not sure, Ginny, any final thoughts perhaps from you before we close here on this topic, and kind of how you see this playing out?
I'll say that, we've been tackling the issue of disinformation in different stages at the company for a while, but what has happened in the last few weeks with the horrible invasion in Ukraine has really been, has brought everything into focus as far as what's real. And the real offline kinetic impact that disinformation can contribute to, if not cause directly. And so I just want to sort of acknowledge that I think what we'll see in the coming weeks and months from the platforms, from the technology companies, everyone has sort of had that awareness. And I do think we'll see a lot of willingness to move on things where maybe there were challenges before. There's a lot of willingness and openness to sharing data for research purposes where I think there was more hesitant before. So to your point earlier about silver lining, obviously it's a little early to be happy about anything, but I do think that we'll see from an information warfare standpoint, a different environment coming out of this. But also just want to thank our friends here who are joining us from Ukraine, and share my sentiments as well, that we are so sorry that this is happening, and anything that Microsoft or the tech community can do, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Very, very well said, Ginny. And John, similarly from you, any other kind of final reflections about anything Ginny just said, or more broadly?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'd like to echo Ginny's sentiments about how awful this invasion has been, and my deep sympathies for what is happening in Ukraine. It's been quite humbling for us. I think we have a lot of tools and approaches we've been using to look at disinformation and misinformation. This has shifted the needle, and we're again back to like looking at new approaches. We will be working hard. We've got a group here whose focus is on Ukraine, and we'll be working hard to develop new approaches and to look for everything we can find. And we would certainly be interested in any pointers StopFake have for pointing us in directions they think we should be looking. And just thank you to you, Scott, and to the Ostrom for organizing this.
No, not at all, John. No, it's our pleasure. And yeah, Oleksandr, Olena, we're all Ukrainian, and we thank you all so very much.
You.
Absolutely.
And thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation for this event and for your support. It's really, really appreciated. And I just want to add that this full invasion just show how very hard, scared, and to what I even it's hard to me to choose right words, to what extent propaganda could come. And it's actually like a real example that we are seeing by our eyes. When the most shocking scene for us is that a lot of Russians, like mostly 70% of Russians, they support this war. And it's all because of this propaganda, all because this non-existence of freedom of speech, non-existence of opposition journalism there, and so on. And we saw, for example, yesterday when it was a negotiation in Istanbul, and the Russian representatives say that they withdraw some units from Kyiv and Chernihiv region. And after that, we saw 1,000 of comments from Russians who say that, why did you stop? Why didn't you kill them all? Why didn't you kill all these Nazis, and so on? And it's really scary right now, and it's all about actually propaganda. So it's a lesson for the whole world when we, oh sorry, it's my younger kid. He wants to sleep. It's a lesson for the whole world that we shouldn't treat Russian media as media, that sometimes we should name things what they are, and Russian journalists, they are not journalism actually. Yeah, so sorry.
Oh no, don't be
and
sorry.
Thank you very much.
No, Olena, no, thank you very much, Olena. Yeah, and you know, as the father of 3 daughters, they're always welcome, and we so hope that your family stays safe and strong in these incredibly challenging times. Oleksandr, any final thought from you, sir, before we have to close here?
I also would like to thank you for the support you provide to Ukraine, to the Ukrainian people. I just want to, I totally agree with Olena. I would like to stress, to emphasize here that I believe in the victory, in the Ukrainian victory. Ukraine will win ultimately. It could take some time, but the victory will be ours. And just follow StopFake and stand with Ukraine.
Here, yeah. Well, thank you all again. How about a round of applause for our distinguished panelists? Thank you very, very much, and thanks of course to our co-host, as was mentioned, at the Hamilton Luger School, the Russian East European Institute, Professor Sarah Phillips, very instrumental in making this happen. At the Ostrom workshop, our wonderful staff, including David Price, thanks to you, and thanks to all of you for joining and for the incredibly important work all these panelists are doing. Hope you have a wonderful, at least restful evening, Olena, if possible, Oleksandr, and thank you all again. Hope to see you soon. And thanks a lot, David.
Hey, no problem.
Yeah.
You can shut it down.
You got it.
All right.